to turn these lights on. There we go. This sermon began when the worship team discovered we still had an open Sunday in May. And by chance, I had just read an article informing me that May would be Older Americans Month, and that the theme this year is Flip the Script on Aging, about transforming how society perceives and talks about aging. And given that for the first time in history there are now more of us over the age of 64 than under the age of 5, it felt like a good time to explore this topic. So that's where this began. We often think of life as a journey, hopefully a long journey. Along the way, we have lots of experiences. Through those experiences, we develop our own set of beliefs that we tend to carry with us through the rest of the journey. Besides the beliefs that we acquire from our own experiences, most of us, when we were very young, acquired certain stereotypes from our families and our culture. From hearing adults around us talking, from other kids, from jokes, from entertainment. These beliefs that we carry subconsciously can have a large impact on our lives, even on our lifespan. Stereotypes take our brain down the same pathways of neurons over and over and over again, and those neural pathways become very strong and automatic. We may occasionally suspect that the stereotype is not true, but it's very hard to change a stereotype in our brains, especially if most of the culture around us is still following and repeating that belief. Even if our intellect starts to believe something different at a subconscious level, that stereotype still has a lot of power over us. I want you to take a moment here. I want you to think of 5 words or phrases that come to mind when you imagine an old person. You won't have to say them out loud. Just whatever comes to mind, don't overthink it. I'll give you a moment here. Now, how many on your list were negative descriptors? I'll bet most of them were, because that's what comes to our mind first. The stereotype is right there subconsciously, it pops to the top. Dr. Becca Levy, a professor of psychology at Yale, has done studies of how our beliefs about aging influence our health as we age. She's given testimony before the U.S. Senate on adverse effects of ageism and serves as an advisor to the World Health Organization's campaign to combat ageism. In her book, Breaking the Age Code, she tells a story about the power of unconscious stereotypes. Let me have a little drink of water. In grad school, she won a fellowship to go off to Japan to investigate how people there think differently about aging. People in Japan have some of the longest lifespans in the world and tend to stay healthier as they age. She thought there might be a psychological reason here rather than just the healthier diet and genetics. Before leaving for Japan, she went to visit her grandmother in Florida. She really admired her grandmother, who was very active in her community, was an avid walker and a competitive golfer. They visited a grocery store together, and while in the produce section, her grandmother ran into the sharp metal edge of a wooden crate on the floor and fell down and ended up with a bloody gash on her leg. As they were hurrying out of the store, her grandmother politely confronted the store owner, who was nearby, about the danger of leaving those crates lying around. "I could have hurt myself," she said, as the blood dripped down her leg. His reply was, "Well, maybe you shouldn't be walking around. It's not my fault old people fall down all the time, so don't go around blaming me." Her grandmother's injury was quickly taken care of, but Levy noticed a profound change in her grandmother's behavior that day. Suddenly, she didn't trust herself to drive anymore. She started asking other people to do things she normally enjoyed doing for herself. She began questioning her competence in a way that she hadn't before. Fortunately, Her grandmother pulled out of this funk in a matter of days and regained her confidence and went back to golfing. But we've probably all known someone older who had some sort of negative experience like this and were never the same afterwards. As Levy left for Japan, she was wondering if a few negative words could affect someone as strong and spunky as her grandmother. What were negative age stereotypes doing to us as a country? What power did they have to actually change the way we age? And what power could we have if we changed the way we thought and talked about aging? We learn age stereotypes when we're at such a young age that we rarely question them. Then these beliefs are reinforced over our lifetime by our surrounding culture. And when we get older, we start to notice every time we're forgetful or do anything that might be evidence of decline, even though we've actually been doing those things all along. And if we talk to ourselves in negative terms, those negative words then affect our behavior. If people have fatalistic attitudes about the inevitability of declining health in later life, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They may think, well, what's the point, and not bother to take care of themselves to stay healthy. In Japan, Levy witnessed many examples of a different way of thinking about aging as a time to enjoy, a time to be honored and respected, a time to be active rather than a time of fear and decline. In our culture, on the other hand, we're constantly bombarded with cultural messages that are just the opposite. Ads incessantly tell us we need to purchase lots of products and procedures guaranteed to make us feel and look younger. The messages, the negative stereotypes, surround us in TV comedies and the comic strips in newspapers. We hear them in comedy routines all the time, and even in fairy tales, and are subjected to them in the algorithms that determine what we see online. The messages may be overt or subtle, messages that aging automatically means decline, disability, and disease, something to be avoided at all costs. Older adults are all lumped together into the same picture and treated as if we are useless and irrelevant unless they're trying to make money off of our vanity. The World Health Organization calls ageism the most widespread and socially accepted prejudice today. When Becca Levy returned from Japan, she set about testing the impact of cultural age stereotypes on the health and well-being of older people here. In study after study, she found, in her words, that older people with more positive perceptions of aging performed better physically and cognitively than those with more negative perceptions. They were more likely to recover from severe disability. They remembered better, they walked faster, they even lived longer. Now, we all know there are some changes that take place as we get older. In our brain, for example, certain tissues start shrinking, affecting our cognitive function and our ability to encode new memories and so forth. Multitasking becomes more difficult. Some of these abilities, like remembering names and numbers, actually start to decline in our 20s, but we don't even notice then. But age stereotypes lump everyone of a certain age group together, even though these changes happen at different ages, to different degrees, to different people. There are lots of 70-year-olds who can perform as well as 20-somethings on a cognitive test. It may take some older people a little longer to learn new things, but there's plenty of evidence that we bring our whole lives of experience into interpreting and working with new abilities and ideas, and with reinterpreting old abilities and ideas. Levy tells a story in her book about the advantages of accumulated experience. Violinist Arnold Steinhardt noticed that as he and his fellow performers in the Guarneri Quartet grew older, they played together for many years, they grew more sensitive to the composer's emotions. When Steinhardt listened to two recordings they had made of a particular piece 20 years apart, he noted that the later recording brought a new level of expression in the way the musicians played. And this deepening from experience is often true in other creative endeavors, and even in some academic fields. Pattern recognition also tends to improve with age, and we have more cross connections in our brains as we age, so we rely on both hemispheres more. Which allows us to see interrelationships better and gives us more adaptability. Geriatrician Louise Aronson wrote, "We treat old age as a disease rather than one of 3 major life stages. We approach old age as a singular, unsavory entity and fail to adequately acknowledge its great pleasures or the unique attributes, contributions, physiology, and priorities of older adults. As humans, we are more than the sum of our parts, but somehow as we age, we get fractionalized into being seen as a body with a disparate collection of broken parts." Most of us are aware by now that people who experience the least declines in cognition and memory all share certain habits, and they are the things your doctor tells you every year. You know, engaging in regular physical activity, eating a healthy diet, getting plenty of sleep, pursuing intellectually stimulating activities like learning a new musical instrument in your 70s or something, staying socially active and connected, managing stress. But there's another factor that's critical. Our life's purpose is usually governed for many years by career and family, but finally your kids move out, and then you retire and everything changes. We've all known people who retired and suddenly had no idea what to do with themselves. They're missing a purpose. Statistics say that unless they find some purpose fairly quickly, they're in danger of shortening their lifespan. One of the best things about growing older is the opportunity for a deeper sense of purpose in our lives. This can result in more authentic connections with others and with ourselves, and deeper connections with what is sacred or holy or of utmost value to us. These kinds of connections are fostered by deep reflection and conversations. People, as they grow older, often find greater courage. Courage, for example, to join forces with others in some kind of service to their neighbors and communities. A reason to get up in the morning, to feel that you matter, because mattering matters. I know I'm preaching to the choir here when I talk about staying engaged and involved with something that gives you purpose. I know most of you are involved in volunteering for the church in various ways, and this church probably wouldn't exist if you didn't do that. And many of you also volunteer in service to your larger community, whether it's writing postcards, encouraging people to vote, providing rides and services for seniors through Village Without Walls, working with youth or with local pride groups, counting election ballots, or ushering at local theater and music events. A complete list would take us all afternoon. And some of you help take care of your grandkids besides. Please don't lose your sense of purpose. It's helping keep you healthy as well as keeping your communities healthy. Now, this is where some of you who are younger can get ahead of the game and consider, who do I want to be when I grow older? And what kind of world do I want to live in? In order to create that world, how can I help to change attitudes towards aging in myself and others? It would be most beneficial if we all do what we can to counter age discrimination. In the job market, for example, where the assumption is that older workers are inefficient and slow and should be cleared out to make room for younger workers, ignoring the skills and experience that being lost in the name of efficiency. And in healthcare, where doctors often assume that treating older patients is a waste of time, money, and care, or believe that it's normal for older people to be depressed. They say, oh, you'll be fine, it's just your age. On the subject of health care, there's an ageist myth that increasing lifespans will be a catastrophe for our healthcare system and sap the public coffers. This myth assumes that aging automatically brings with it a range of inevitable physical and mental illness. Actually, evidence strongly suggests that as humans live longer, we're starting to see them stay healthy longer. Common illnesses are now occurring later in life. Today, people are 2.5 times likelier to enter their 60s without any chronic illnesses than they were a century ago. A study of 33 wealthy countries found that population longevity correlates negatively with health expenditures. We need to counter those negative age benefits in ourselves also. When we forget something, why do we call it a senior moment when it can happen at any age? Did you know that in later life, some kinds of memory actually tend to improve, like semantic memory, which is the recall of general knowledge, how the world works, how things work. Memory that allows you to recall how to carry out a routine behavior, like riding a bicycle or fixing an omelet, that tends to stay about the same. The ability to recall the details of a specific experience at a particular time and place may decline somewhat. But in most ways, our memory is not getting worse. Levy's studies found that Americans had the most negative age beliefs of the groups she studied and performed worse on all the memory tasks. Chinese elders, on the other hand, had the most positive age beliefs and performed best across the board. The older participants in China performed just as well on memory tasks as their younger counterparts, because the Chinese don't have those age stereotypes. So your memory performance in later life can be hijacked by what your culture has taught you to believe about aging. Other studies that Levy performed came up with similar results. What about genes, you ask? Increasingly, scientists are discovering that cultural and environmental factors play an important role in determining our health. Genes are powerful, but which of our genes actually are expressed and which are suppressed depends on environmental factors, including what we believe and how we're treated by others, because that affects our self-esteem. Those risky genes involved in the risks for dementia are less likely to be expressed if you have positive age beliefs. That's what numerous studies have now shown. So how do we go about adopting more positive attitudes? There are ways we can resist and reverse our negative beliefs and keep ourselves healthier. First, we have to be aware of negative age beliefs. We can monitor our own thoughts and speech and notice negative stereotypes. We can notice how we speak to others regarding aging and how we talk to ourselves. That's important. But long-held stereotypes are not easily dislodged, so we need to be gentle and patient with ourselves and just keep noticing and correcting ourselves. When we hear someone else using negative age stereotypes, depending on our comfort in the situation, we can call them out and challenge them, but again, gently with humor and patience. We're dealing with subconscious ideas here. Laying guilt on people is more likely to make them stubborn and resentful. A gentle reminder without a lot of drama will at least get the idea into their heads, like, you do understand, of course, that what you said about such and such is not really true of most of us. They may have never have consciously thought about it before. And the most important thing is that speaking up reinforces our own positive attitudes. Paying more attention to positive models of aging can also help us break down the negative beliefs. Having positive role models, whether they're famous people, folks who are in the news, or someone close to us, can help us change our behavior. We can seek out biographies of positive role models and note specific qualities that we admire. Ageism is deeply rooted in the structure of our society, so we can encourage lawmakers and communities to take seriously the concerns of older adults, while recognizing that we can't all be lumped together. We are as diverse as any other age group. We can encourage intergenerational planning groups. We can pay attention to negative stereotypes in advertising and use our consumer power to encourage more realistic ideas. I'm sure you can think of many more ways to be creative in breaking down the old conceptions. In closing, I would like to read some words from Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old by Richard Leiter and David Shapiro. They say, as we age, we find ourselves faced with this choice: get old or grow old. Getting old is a passive default state in which we sit back and let aging happen to us. Growing old is an active state that requires a purpose path and a practice. We say yes to the invitations and challenges of aging and no to attitudes and behaviors that no longer serve us. We need a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to do what we do, a reason to live. We need to feel relevant, that we matter. Mattering matters, full stop. Thank you for listening. Blessed be, and may the 4th be with you.